Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Tekla Kenningham, director of the Whidbey Island Music Festival, and I'm so happy to see all of you here today. Before the concert, we have a very, very special guest today who has managed to travel through the space-time continuum from roughly 1860s Germany to join us here in 2025 in Freeland, Washington. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Frau Clara Schumann, who is traveling to Ottawa.
I've been riding on a train going to Baden-Baden where I have a holiday home, and so just excuse me a moment while I get comfortable here. How are you all today? Is the weather always like this? So I don't know what you all know about me, but we won't speak very much about the 7 children that I have. But as I understand, Valentine's Day was not so long ago. I thought you might enjoy hearing how I met dear Robert, my husband. My father recently returned my childhood journals to me. I'm so excited about this. These were the companion of my girlhood, and I thought I might read to you a few of the stories of my childhood, my growing up, falling in love with Robert. I think there's even a story about Herr Brahms in here. Let's see, what shall we find? So, does anybody know when it was, how old I was when I met Robert? I was a girl of 11, and he heard me performing, and he said, I want to play as well as that child does. And he signed up for piano lessons with my father, Herr Wieck, and he moved into our house, and so I got to know him really quite well. When I wasn't off concertizing, because that's what child prodigies do, is we travel and we concertize. He would call us into his room in the evening, me and my 2 brothers, and he would play with us all together. And it was some of the happiest, most joyous times of my youth. There was not a lot of playtime. Because, of course, I took piano lessons every day. I practiced an additional 2 hours every day. One must walk. You know this. You walk for an hour a day. And so the times with Robert in the evening were always charming. By the time I was a young lady, I knew that I quite liked Robert. And then the very first time, let me see if I can find it. It's on a different page. Yes. I was showing Robert out to the door. I was 16. And he stole a kiss. I almost dropped the lantern that I was holding, and I thought I was going to faint. It was just so romantic. What was he doing thinking to kiss me while I was holding a lamp? Really? And so as we grew up and we fell in love and we knew that we wanted to marry, in Germany, the custom is that all of the parents must agree that the match is a good one. And Robert has no living parents. His father died long ago. He actually, he was too overcome to attend his mother's funeral, so he skipped it and spent it on a date with me instead. But my parents, my mother said, yes, absolutely, marry him. This is a great choice. My father refused. We had to go to court and sue for permission to marry. This took 3 years. Father sent me off to tour in Paris alone as a woman of 19. He hired a companion I did not know. And I suspect he wanted to see if I would fail on my own, because he had always traveled with me before. But I had been paying attention. Our journal, instead of going to school, he had me copy all of his business letters into my journal. I learned how to coordinate a concert, how to program a recital, how to book a venue. Did you know, I'm sure you organize concerts today the same way that we do in Vienna and in Dusseldorf. Concerts are booked about a week in advance, and word is announced 2 to 3 days in advance. And it's just so lovely that you all happen to be free today with 2 to 3 days notice to come and join me. I'm so happy about this. But it really takes quite a lot of work in writing so many letters. And so I learned, and I succeeded. And so Robert and I were communicating. We were writing our letters back and forth. We agreed that we were going to sue for the right to marry. And that's why there are so many love songs. Robert had to prove to the courts that he could afford to support a wife. And you can turn out a love song actually pretty quickly. So he was probably publishing several love songs a week, proving to the courts that he could afford to support a wife. He was, in fact, already supporting me. Father would not welcome me home. My piano, all of my clothes, all of them were locked inside Father's house. And I had to live with my mother. They're divorced, but that's a story for another day. And so I lived with Mother, and Robert supported me as a fiance and my wife. He even sent gifts of money. It's just so heartwarming. And so we finally were able to marry. The courts said, yes, absolutely, this is an appropriate match. We married on Easter Sunday on my 21st birthday. So then time passes on. We get a few years into the future. Does anybody recollect how old I was when I met Robert? 11. Very well done. Our firstborn, Marie, was 11 or 12 when Robert and I were out on a walk. And a handsome young man knocked on the door, and she opened it, because of course she did. And this handsome young man said, "Is Herr Schumann at home?" She said, "No, they've gone out for a walk." So he said, "I'll come back tomorrow." And the next day, young Brahms, Herr Brahms, came. And he started to play. He introduced himself to Robert. He started to play some of his compositions. And Robert said, wait, I must go get my wife. And he brought me back, and we spent the whole morning hearing some glorious music. It really was amazing. And that lunch that day was just wonderful. Now, Brahms, you must understand, was quite handsome. Long blonde hair, beautiful blue eyes, handsome as a picture. So, I wonder, should I stick with happy memories, or should I talk about how Robert went and became more ill? What do we think?
How did Robert become ill?
Well, Robert had never been quite well. Even before I married him, I knew that his sister, they had fudged her death certificate a little bit to say that she had died of a nervous ailment, but we all knew that she had really done herself in. So we knew that melancholia ran in the family. And so Robert from time to time had these sad spells, and we knew that. Even when we were engaged, he dreamed that he would take off his wedding ring, throw it into the Rhine, and drown himself. And throughout our marriage, he had more and more of these sad episodes and became more and more ill. On our trip to Russia, we did go to Russia, we did play for the Tsar in the Winter Castle. It was beautiful. But he was dreadfully ill. He lost his vision at one time. It was really, really hard. And he was, all the reports talk about him holding his head in his hands, and he would hardly speak to anyone, and I was trying to speak for him, and they didn't care for our accent, but they only said that to each other. I found out about it later in the newspapers. So as our marriage continued, Robert became more and more sad, more and more frequently, and then he stopped composing as much. And then he started saying, "Do you hear that? Do you hear the music?" And there was no music. And one day, his dream of the past came true, and he threw his wedding ring in the Rhine, and he walked in. Marie was not there, our daughter, but she saw him being returned. And that was the last she saw of him, was him being returned to the house. He voluntarily went to an asylum in the hopes of becoming healthy again and rejoining his family. My goal, being pregnant once again, was the 7th child at that time. My goal was that he not come home to a family that was scarred and riddled with debt from his medical bills and lack of income, and so I resumed concertizing as soon as I had the baby. People were kindly offering money. Felix Mendelssohn's brother, who was the banker, wrote to us and very kindly offered us a large sum to keep us going. And so I was on one of these concert tours when we got the message that I needed to return home, and it was time to come home. So I come home, I pick up Herr Brahms on the way, Joachim meets us at the train station, Joachim the violinist, violist, and we go to the asylum, and I'm able to see Robert a little bit. He'd been not eating or drinking much at all. And we slipped away to the train station to pick up another friend, and he passed away all by himself. I never could bring myself to compose after that. I only ever compose when I'm asked, and my father and my husband were the only people that asked me to compose. So I would love to share some of my early works with you. I brought a few of them today. The first one that I'd like to share is a prelude. This one, yes. I was increasing in the family way, and Robert was going through a fuguing passion. He just had to be learning all about fugues, and so we were writing preludes and fugues together. And so this is prelude number 1, my opus 16. Share a little bit about what a honeymoon with Robert was like. He thought it would just be so fetching if we collaborated on composition together, because once one starts, how can one leave off? And so we wrote a set of songs, and we did not admit who wrote which song. And people are still angry with us about this, because it's just attributed to both of us, the whole set, but we know that I know which ones I wrote. But it's a little bit of a secret. The other thing was he had dreams. He wanted a housefrau, a housewife. So for our first Christmas, he bought me a cookbook. Bless him. I don't cook. So then I thought I would also share with you, they found a picture of me from when I was much younger. Look what I did with my hair. The crazy things we did back then. These are variations on a theme of Robert's. And so I thought I'd share with you the theme and a few of the variations. that says, "Art is a beautiful gift. What is more beautiful than to clothe one's feelings and sounds? What a comfort in sad hours. What a pleasure. What a wonderful feeling to provide an hour of happiness to others. And what a sublime feeling to pursue art so that one gives one's life for it." It's an honor to share this with you. I had saved some time because I thought there might be some questions. And I wonder if people have questions. I know no one's going to ask me about this. Yes, ma'am.
So what about your relationship with Brahms? Was there an affair?
Oh, I can hardly believe that you would ask me about such a thing. I am a respectable widow, I'll have you know. We're very dear friends. It is true that he took the apartment next to ours while Robert was in the insane asylum. It is true that he helped us with our budget, but more than that. Yes, ma'am.
How are you received as a woman in this man's world of composing, playing?
I caught a glimpse of another letter to someone else. And in the future, I hope to work at a music conservatory. And it's really a man's world, as you said, as a professor. So another woman is also planning to apply, because if they're willing to hire Frau Schumann, myself, why would they not also hire other women? And the headmaster wrote back and said, "As for Frau Schumann, I consider her a man." So I'm held in such high esteem as an interpreter of music that it transcends how I'm seen as a woman. And that's a unique position to be in as someone who is decidedly not a feminist. Yes.
Where did you live and what was the feel in that city?
Where did I live? In Austria and Germany. We moved around quite a bit as needed. A lot of traveling and tours. And sorry, what was the other part of the question?
And what was the feel? One, where your children lived, and what was the feel of that happening?
Where my children live, I would love to talk about that. So when Marie arrived, I cared for her as any mother would. And I didn't have a lot of close friends my own age or gender. And so it took me a little bit to learn about nannies and aunties and uncles and boarding schools. But once I had that figured out, I didn't let children slow me down. And so they were packed off 2 or 3 here and there. And I'm a very good mother. I write so many letters. Julia, I believe, has just caught the eye of an Italian count, but she's got a little bit of consumption, so hopefully that's going to sort itself out. Ferdinand has gone into the army. Hopefully no leg wounds will come of that. Marie, I don't see Marie marrying. I think she's going to be my assistant for quite a long time to come. She likes to travel with me. She helps me press my gowns. This is not a one-woman affair to wear Caligan. I need several gowns when I travel, Yes. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Were you ever reconciled with your father, and did he appreciate what you had achieved despite
Speak up.
your...
Was I ever reconciled with my father, and did he recognize what I had achieved? A little bit, and not really. He was always very proud of who I was and how well I played. He wanted me always to be simple, middle-class, regular Clara. But during the lawsuit, one of the things he alleged quite firmly was that I had not been brought up to run a household. And so Robert couldn't afford to marry me because I was going to need double the budget of a normal house, because that was how I had been raised, was to be an artist and to have extravagant gowns and to travel and to concertize, and I wouldn't know how to be economical or cook my own food. And so I would need more servants to do these things. I reconciled with my father cautiously. My husband never quite did. There were some really harsh things that were said. Everyone thought there were some really harsh things that were said, and in fact, people wondered, had my father gone a little bit mad during our courtship? Because he was writing to newspapers, he wrote to newspapers while I was engaged, and said, don't anybody go to hear Clara Wieck play. She plays so badly, she's going to ruin any instrument she plays, and she's a poor moral character. She will destroy the young women that go to see her. So it's a little hard to come back. Yes, it's a little hard to reconcile with a father who's willing to say such things. And he said harsher, worse things about Robert. And so I had always been close to my father, so I did want that father presence. But Robert was such a calm person. And after that, being in my father's presence, he's just a very active person, lots going on and much to say, and all of a sudden at top volume. It's hard to be restful with my father, you know? It's just not the same as it was. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Did you have any musical relationship with Felix Mendelssohn?
Oh, yes. I adore playing music with Felix. It's ever so much fun to play duets with him on the stage and off. He conducted while I played concertos with his orchestra. Felix is a dear friend. We lost him far too soon. We named our son after him.
Mendelssohn.
Yes.
That was Mendelssohn.
Yes, ma'am.
Who were musical influences beyond Robert?
Who were my musical influences? Everyone. Papa took me to operas starting when I was 6. I heard every opera in Leipzig since I was 6. And there's a unique thing, when you think about composers, many of them died quite young. And so I was young enough that I met Mendelssohn, Chopin, not Beethoven, Schumann. But then as that first wave of romantics passed, I met the new romantics. I met Liszt, I met Wagner. And so I have this double dose of romantics. And I'm aware of everybody. I adore new music. I think it's very important to play new music. And so much of my practice is either reviewing my favorites for upcoming concerts or reading new music, because I think it's so important to be up to date on what's being freshly composed. You might find it interesting to know, I'm traveling so much and concertizing so much. I find it really tedious to put together a fresh concert program at every city. So I developed a formula and a template. And I thought it would be good to start off with some Bach or maybe some Scarlatti. I love playing Beethoven, so I usually program some Beethoven. And then some fresh modern stuff like the Mendelssohn, and of course something by my beloved husband. And this template has served me really well as I travel city to city. Yes, oh yes.
I'm really curious about, you needed to be invited to compose. And so
Yes.
it was your father and your husband who did that, and that once they weren't there, I'm curious about what's that all about? Can you?
Why do I need to be invited to compose? I will start with, I believe I have this correct. No woman has ever successfully composed. Am I to be the first? I think not. I'm also well aware that my personal strength is as an interpretive artist, and I know that my current fame exceeds Robert's. But that's about to flip, as Robert is so much more musical than I am. And so as his compositions become better known, the composer lives on while the interpretive artist is forgotten. And Robert says composing is seductive. It draws you in. Once you start, you cannot stop. I find it very tedious. And so I write when I'm asked, and I can do the composition exercises. I can write a fugue, but I'm also quite busy. I'm now a mother of 7 children. I have to see to the house. I write letters for an hour a day. I walk for an hour a day. I must practice. I teach, and all lessons are an hour long. My day is quite full. So I think there's competing interests, and there's a swirl going on that it's difficult to make time when one is not naturally inclined to a particular task. Oh, yeah, so many questions, yes.
Well, I was wondering about children's music. What did you play for your children?
Well, if you'll recall, so what do I play for my children? They're off at their aunties and uncles. I don't play them very much music. But I do perform while I'm in the family way. I perform up through the 8th month of pregnancy, more than once. Yeah.
Do you travel from one performance to the other, or do you always play in Leipzig? And if you had to travel, by what means? And who went with you?
Robert says when I went to Copenhagen that everybody assumes that I had to sail through icebergs and fly on reindeer to get there. And that's absolutely not true. We talked about traveling to America because artists that can travel to America and tour for a year make a lot of money and are able to set themselves up for almost life. It gives you a nice lump sum that you can set aside and work with for a whole lifetime. We kept putting it off, and then we had too many children to go. So we would travel. We went to Russia twice, and that you do by train until you have to go by sleigh. We would travel by boat. I enjoy traveling through London. There they have concert arrangers, and so the workload on myself is quite a bit lessened, and I really enjoy that. I travel all through Germany. As a child, we went to Paris quite a lot. My father was really puzzled because in Paris, every time I performed, I needed to have a fresh gown, and it had to be white. But one napkin for the whole week. He couldn't make sense of this. It didn't make sense at all.
Did you travel by coach?
Yes, Father
And
does not like to spend money, and so if we travel by coach, we're sleeping in that coach, and the horses just change. And so we're not staying in a hotel. You just keep paying money, and the horses change, and you sleep in the coach, and you stay in the coach till you get out.
Thank you.
Yes. Let's see, what else? I'm curious. I'll just share. Franz Liszt is somebody that everybody thinks is amazing. He's got such impressive technique. But his sound hurts my ears, and it seems very showy. But don't tell him I said that, because he still likes me. And I don't want him to know that I find his sound is harsh to the ear, and it's overly showy when it doesn't need to be. He doesn't play from the heart like he could. And there was that one time that he told my husband to compose a quintet, and then he was an hour late to the premiere. He never apologized. I had arranged it specially for him, and then he said he didn't like it. But don't tell him I said any of those things. This is just between us.
Can you give us some more music, please?
Some more music. Yes. This one, I just have the prelude ready to go, so you'll have to forgive the cadence because it will leave you wanting something, but I don't have the fugue in my fingers today. So this is prelude number 3. coffee hour. I love coffee. I introduced dear Johannes to coffee, and I gave him a coffee maker once as a present, so I'm ever so delighted that you have coffee. And I think I'll return the audience back to Ms. Tekla if there are no more questions. Yes, ma'am?
One more question.
Yes.
After Robert died, what happened to the relationship with Johannes Brahms?
Repeat the question.
So after my husband died, what happened with Brahms? Well, I'm going to start by observing that a woman, no matter her status, would never travel alone with another man, no matter what. And so we did travel together with other people. Brahms's sister, some of my children, other companions. When I was summoned back to the asylum, I took the long way around because dear Johannes had never seen the sea. And so we needed for him to see the North Sea on our way to Robert's deathbed. We made a pact that we would burn all of our letters, and Marie talked me out of it. So I have all of his letters, but I understand he's going to be good and keep his word. Does that sufficiently not answer your question?
Did he ever make a proposal to you after Robert's passing?
He proposed to Julia, my daughter, which I really struggled with. And I couldn't acknowledge it till she had made a suitable marriage with that Italian count. That is a much better match for Julia. I oversaw something he wrote that knowing Clara has spoiled me for unmarried women. And I don't quite know what to make of that. Yes.
Did you ever perform Brahms's music?
I adore performing his music.
Could you give us a sample?
I don't have any of it with me. Yes.
Did any of your children grow up to be musicians?
Oh, so did any of my children grow up to be musicians? Several of them wished to be. And I struggled because I know they bear their father's name. And so they have a lot to live up to. And so I don't know whether to encourage them in this or to squash it. So my oldest, Marie, co-teaches with me. She teaches the younger, less advanced students, and then when they're good enough, I get them. One young man practiced 7 hours a day to get into my studio. I'm very proud of him. And then the boys. I can't recollect enough. We're going to say Felix. Felix is a dear boy. We didn't get his diagnosis early enough, and so I regret now that I was so harsh with him about being a good musician. But he really wanted to be a good musician, and he's a dear boy, and he's better off. He's safe where he is now. But no one made a living of it, which I suspect is what you mean.
Or enjoyed it?
Oh yes, of course we all enjoy it. There was a comment somewhere about being surrounded by a husband and children who live in a world of imagination makes my life very challenging. Yes.
Did you play Christmas music and things in the house?
Do I play Christmas music in my house? I'm not a church musician. I'm casting my mind back through all of the things. I don't have a clear memory of that. Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry.
If you were to do it over again, would you make any different decisions about your life, your profession, or the people you spent your life with?
If I were to do it over again, what would I do differently, professionally and relationally? Being surrounded by music and musicians as I am is really a very special honor. I don't think I would change that. I wish that my husband and I had more frank conversations about how many children we each wished for. Seven was maybe a few more than I wished to bring on. And the longer that I perform, the more the pain in my arms grows. I wish that were not so. So my arms are always aching, and that's very troubling. tendonitis, and there's probably a different colorful word for that. It, yeah, something German that I can't pronounce. Isn't that always the way? Yeah. So I think we're going to take a quick break before the concert starts at 3. But I've so enjoyed spending time with you all, and I look forward to chatting with anybody at the coffee break.
Yeah, Frau Schumann will be joining us at the intermission for a coffee and kuchen with cream, so please meet her for some cake and coffee. She'll be happy to chat with you.
Thank you.